Hello friends, Mark Johnson here. Welcome back to my TRIRIGA development series. This is the TRIRIGA War Room where experts advise, and our video today is going to be on the TRIRIGA Form Builder tool. So today is just going to be an overview. We're going to lay some groundwork for going a little bit deeper into the Form Builder tool. And what we'll do is we're going to go ahead and open up an existing form and talk about the different properties and settings and the concepts involved with building forms and what the different sections of the Form Builder tool are. And then in our next video, we will actually create our first form for our CST sports object that we have created in the previous videos for this series. So without further ado, again, welcome. Please like, subscribe. That's really the only way I have of knowing if you guys find these videos helpful or not. And as always, if you have any suggestions for future videos, please feel free to leave those either in the comments or message me directly. You can reach out to me directly on LinkedIn. So let's get started. We're going to go back to our TRIRIGA 11.1 4.1 instance that we created our module and RBO in. So we get ourselves logged in, and we're going to go to the Tools menu and then the Form Builder tool. So the Form Builder tool allows us to create forms, and the forms are our presentation mechanism for the users. So the business object, right? You define the object and you can then build a form which takes that object definition and displays it for the users to be able to input data into the underlying fields that are on the business object. So let's go to we'll go to location and then the tribe building. This is kind of a busy form. So when you first open the form, you have your navigation panel on the left. So the way that the forms are laid out in this navigation is it's a hierarchy, right? So at the very top level is the form. So if we click on the form and then in our properties window, we get the actual different form properties, all right? And then underneath the form, we have these folders here, and these represent tabs. So a tab doesn't is just a container, and that's why it's a folder, right? You're not going to put in a field or anything on the tab. Now you can do certain things with tabs, like you can have a tab that loads like a different web page, right? It has a URL address in it, and it can load. But for the most part, your forms are going to have you're going to organize them in tabs, and then you're going to have sections, and there's different types of sections that are available. So as we expanded the general here, right, this attention section, general section, detail section. So the the tabs are listed here by their name, and the sections are listed by their label. So if I click on the attention section, right, I can see that the name of the section is actually try user message, and the label's attention. Now, there are multiple types of sections, and we'll actually probably talk about those more as we get into actually creating our old form. But I do want to highlight just a few different types of sections. The first type of section is the most common type of section. Called a form section. As you can see here, it's listed in the type. So a form section gives us basically a container that we can then add fields that we want to be displayed in that particular section. So you can see when I have a section highlighted in the components window, I have the ability to select fields, right? Where, if I'm on a tab, I've got the ability to select sections, right? And add them into my tab. So that's the most common and the easiest way of adding it. There's actually the old method of doing it is still supported in TRIRIGA, and it's a little more difficult. So you wouldn't want to necessarily do it. But we may talk about that as well, just so you guys can see, how it used to be like. Things have gotten a bit better for us over the years in the development. Still not to the point that we can do drag and drop, editing of a form, which would be, beautiful. But it is all based on rows and columns. So even our sections, you'll see in the section some of the values in that the properties, right? We have the row number and the column number, and then the column span. So how many columns wide is that section going to be? And so we arrange all of our sections based in this row and column grid, and then inside of each section, you arrange all the fields in that sort of row and column grid. So the form section is the most common. We're going to do that so that we can put our fields onto the form. The other most common is going to be probably a query section. And so if we come down here under restrictions, as we can look here on the screen and see, right, we got our find and our remove actions here, that this is a query section. So this is going to actually show records um, on our on our form. So the records that get shown are going to be specified via the query that the section is pointing to. So you can't add individual fields in with a query section. So it's not like you can have your field values in the, right above or right below the query by having it in the same section. Now you can accomplish the same thing because you can create, a form section above or below and then have the fields that are available. And you do have the ability to hide like the section label so it doesn't even look like it's, a separate section. It makes it look like it's all part of the same thing. So there are things that you can do there for that. So again, the general layout, it's hierarchy, starts at the building, or I'm sorry, the form level, right? The name of the form, you click on it, you have the form properties. Click on a tab, you have the tab properties. Click on a section, you have the section properties. Now, one thing you'll notice, right, there's this attention section. It's actually on each tab, right? So this is a convention that's used in the attention section is the section where you're going to put messages to the user in. So if there's like an error or you're going to put in some sort of special instruction or anything like that, it's going to go here into this attention section. So the reason why you have it on each tab is so that if a user is on a different tab, they wouldn't see the error message or the instruction. They wouldn't necessarily know what to do if you're popping that data up on a different tab. So by having the attention section as a default and have it at the top of the form and at the top of each tab, then it won't matter what tab the user is on. If there's a message, it's going to display on all of them because all of these sections are pointing to the same exact field. Right? So if we look here, it's the try user message TX field, right? And then we've got the field properties here. Right? We've got the section properties here. So there, you can do things like you can see there's the title bar color. So generally for this attention section, you have it hidden by default. So even though I can see it here on the form builder, right, its settings are going to be set to where it's not going to be visible when you open the form, right? So when there's an error condition or message condition, you're going to set this attention section, and then you're going to make it visible to the user. So that's the navigation. If you needed to, delete a field, you would just click on the field that you wanted to delete. Now, be very careful doing this. You would select it, and then up here in this window or area, or toolbar area, you would see a delete action, right? Now, I have not revised this form, so I don't have a delete action available to me. But if I was to revise this form, there would be a delete action. So just be careful. What you think you have selected and what is really selected aren't always the same thing, right? So you can end up deleting things that you didn't intend to by just, um, like say you clicked on the section, right? So you can see everything's highlighted here. And maybe I was really just trying to click on legal name. And then if I click delete, it would delete the whole section. Right? It's going to say, "Are you sure?" And you're going to go, "Of course, I'm sure." And you click it, and then boom, it's gone. So now, thankfully, with object revisions nowadays, it's not a big deal, right? You can just publish the previous revision, no harm, no foul, start back over on your changes, which is a lot better than in the old days where you'd have to actually OM out the form before you published it, so it would have the previous version, and then you would publish, and then you would bring in the OM to override it. So it was a big hassle. So things have definitely gotten nicer, gotten easier for us. Love the revisions. Would love to see some continue um, development as far as the form builder goes. Maybe finally someday get to that, that drag and drop, so you don't have to uh, do just all the row and columns, right? It'd be nice to be able to grab this detail section and just drag it up, if I wanted it over the general section or whatnot. But with the new UX framework, that it's probably not ever going to happen, right? You want that kind of control in your form presentation and controlling what the user sees. That's probably the way to go. All right. So each level of our hierarchy, and each level of the object, you click that object, you get that object's properties. In the components window, you get the things that you can add at that level, right? So when you're inside of a section, right, you've got fields that you can add to your form. Or if if you have the section selected, you can do that. The includes forms tab. So the includes is for hierarchy objects, right? It tells this is where we come to set basically what type of object can be created at this level by this record type. So you can see, for the building, floors can be created underneath of it, and so can vertical shafts. We'll talk more about includes in a later video. I do plan on doing a specific video on creating classification. So we'll have to create a classification BO and a classification form, and we'll have to then, add the includes on the business object as well as the form. So we'll dive into all this at that time, what this is. You do have the ability to have reports that you have tied to a form. They're called form reports, and this is where you add them. So like on this particular form, right, the building system summary report is available, and the space rollup summary building level is available to it. And then we have a state transition tab. So the state transition for forms is similar to the state transition family on the business object. There are some differences. So the state family for the forms can be a subset of the state family on the business object. That means you don't have to have all the same transitions that are on the business object, right? You still have to have a valid state family, right? But you don't have to have all the same transitions. And this can be helpful when you have maybe multiple forms and you're going to have different logic that you want to, occur for the different forms. So the layout here, it doesn't matter what order they're in, just like in the state family for the business object, right? The important thing is what's the interconnections, right? So when you create a new record, it's always going to start out in the null state. So in this particular case, right, this state transition isn't all the way to the left. Again, it's not a big deal. And then I can see that the transitions that are available to me out in the null state, I only have one, and it's create draft. And you can see one of the differences here on the state family for the forms is there's no sub actions, right? Sub actions are only on the business object, right? So you do have the ability to have certain other actions happen, like you can have a form pop up on this action, right? Which you do sometimes because you're going to have like a log form, right? And if the user is going to trigger this transition, you want to capture in the form, okay, why are you doing this transition, right? You see this For instance, like in the lease, whenever you revise a lease, there's a form that pops up on that transaction, and then you have to fill in the information, and then that particular record gets saved. But we do have properties for the state family here. So on the form with the state family, you can be more restrictive. You can't be less restrictive than the business object. So what I mean by that is if on the business object this state transition is read-only, then this read-only would be checkboxed on the form and it would be grayed out. I wouldn't be able to deselect it because the business object says that it's read-only, right? So trying to make it not read-only would be less restrictive. Can't do that on the form. I can be more restrictive. So this state transition is not read-only on the business object, but I can make it read-only for this form. Right? The default display just says, is this transition available on the screen, right? Can the user see it, right? So you remember we've kind of have that as well on the business object. Close window means that once this transition happens, it closes the window or it closes this record, right? So you'll do that a lot of times if you're triggering some logic based off of the transition, then it's going to take some time, right? And you don't want the record to be open because you don't want the user doing further things. So you would select here to close the window, and then you can let the logic continue to run in the background. So access keys, it's kind of like a hotkey to be able to access that particular transition. The module and form information as far as what form you want to pop up. We'll probably talk about this all a little bit more later. So again, you got your transitions up here, right? I can move this to the right. I can move it to the left. I can save it. One thing we'll do when we go to create our form, we'll see is that one of the things that we're going to have to do is we're going to have to import the state family from the business object. So if this business object was, I'm sorry, if this form was in revision, then we could import the state family from the business object, right? So if you modify a business object and you add a new state transition to that business object, it does not automatically appear on all the forms that use that business object. You'd have to come into the form, modify this form, right? Put it in revision, and then there would be a little action up here would be import, so that you can import it from the business object. We will actually do this in the next video, so I'm not going to go into it too much more. We've got a revisions window here, which just shows us the revision. So I can see based off the object label that this was last modified in the TRIRIGA 11.1. So it was modified in this particular version that we're using. It's modified date. If we had multiple ones, we can then do things like compare revisions so we can see what changed, right? And then, of course, we can publish a previous revision if we needed to. So this is our form builder tool. We've got our navigation window, again arranged in a hierarchy. And we've got the layout window. So you want to be careful of what you're selecting here. And you can see, right, as I select things, it doesn't necessarily automatically jump to that point in the screen for me. So sometimes when you select an object, you got to kind of scroll up and down and see if you can find it. So in this case, I'm not seeing anything. So it's the building class data attributes. I come down here under building class data attributes, and we see that, oh, there's nothing shown here. But the reason for that. So coming back to the sections and section types, which this is another most common section I forgot to mention earlier, this is a smart section, right? So with smart sections, we have the ability to display logic or record data from a different record that is associated to our object on our form. So we will deal with smart sections and all their different settings and all their different types in a later video. So you can see, this building form is kind of a good example, right? We've got smart sections, we've got query sections, and we have form sections on it. So one of the interesting things, since I happen to select this, is this is a smart section, and you can see it kind of almost is similar to like a query section for in this particular case, right? It's got, we don't have the individual fields listed in there like this, right? I don't see a section that has these fields. It's in columns, right? Name, value, units. So the reason for that is because this is a multi-record smart section, and multi-record smart sections actually predate query sections. This is how you would show associated records, multiple records, back before we had queries. So queries are the better way of handling it now, but you can see this by going under source details, which this is kind of a neat feature in the form. So whenever you have anything selected, like a field or something, you can click on source details, and it'll pop open a window, and it'll show you the information of that object, on the business object, right? What's the further information. So in this case, right, it is a smart section, right? We can we can see that it's a multi-record smart section because the multi-record smart section is selected, right? And that it's a dependent section. So we can see some of the properties, likewise, if I come up here and say I needed to see a little more information on the name field, right? I could scroll down, select source details, and it's going to show me the information on the name field, what's name, its label, right? I can see some of the different properties that are defined there on the business object, right? That do not auto-populate, that it's required field, result column selected, staging table selected, right? It's not a locator field. It's not a formula. I can see that from here. So it is quite helpful as you're doing, development on the form. Sometimes you do need to see what those underlying BO properties are. And you don't want to have to close your form, navigate back to the builder tools and open up the data modeler and then go to the BO and then look, get the information you need and then close it, go back to the tools, go back to the form builder, come back in and open your form. It can be uh, you know, time consuming and tedious. So that is kind of a quick, short way that you can see some of the underlying information of what that object is. So you will see also this little red asterisk next to the name field tells us that is a required field. So whenever you have a required field, it's going to show up with that red asterisk to the left of it, right? So what that is going to do for us is that the user will not be able to state transition this record until there's a value in that required field. So as long as that field is visible, then the enforcement on that field is going to be there. And by visible, I mean in the actual field properties here, if it's visible or not, right? So if for some reason, I said, what, I don't care about the name field on the building. I don't want the user to see it. I don't want them to be able to type anything into it. And I made it not visible. So it's not visible on the form for the user. Then the enforcement of that read only is not going to take place, right? Now, it used to be as if you were on a different tab. So this is on the general tab. And so if I was the user and I was on, say, the restrictions tab, then and I went to do my state transition, I could because it only did the enforcement on the tab that it was on. But the system now does do the enforcement across all the tabs, whether you're on that tab or not. So it doesn't have to be visible on the user screen as far as that's the active tab that they're on, but it does have to be visible so that if they go to that tab, the field would be visible, right? So if it is, then that enforcement it takes place, right? So if the user tries to transition that record without having that value, they're going to get a little error message to kind of highlight and show the required field that they're missing. So we'll go through that process in a later video, I'm sure. But you can see, right? as we're going to go and create our form, right? This particular form, it took a lot of time to create, right? You have to create each of the sections. You have to have them into the order that you want. Inside of each section, you have to lay out the fields, right? These are in row and column order, so you can see in the properties what the row is, the number of row spans, the column span, and so you have to do this. So as you add fields to a section, they're going to show up. It's going to automatically go into basically a two-column format, and then after the second item or the second column, then it'll go to a new row. So as you click a bunch of things, the order you click them in down here does matter, right? And so it'll do them in that order. So if this was a completely blank section, and I click this field first and then this field second, well, that would be row one, column two, or I'm sorry, row one, column one. This would be row one, column two. And then the next thing I selected would be row two, column one. So it doesn't matter that in this list, this field comes first because I selected it third. It would have been in the first one in the second row. Now you see here, right, there's three fields that are here, and this one is actually taking up, several rows, so it's buttoning up. So in your form development, right, you have to control all that with rows and columns. And so you do have one thing to be aware of as well, in that this follows standard HTML, guidelines, which means that everything is going to try to move up and to the left. So if I were to make these fields all not visible, then this image field would slide automatically over to all the way to the left. So when the user is viewing this form, that image field would be to the left. So it gets a little tricky when you're trying to put a field, off to the side where it looks like to the left of it is empty. So sometimes you have to do a little trick in where you'll add a field, a form field, to the form, which is a field that doesn't exist on the business object. And so you add the form field and you just leave its label blank. And so the user then doesn't see it, but it's there. The system sees it, right? And so if it was here and all this other stuff wasn't visible, then the image field would run into it and wouldn't be able to move to the left. So as you do your development, all this stuff wants to move up and to the left, right? So it gets a little crazy going through, and it can be a little tedious setting all these rows and columns. So you want to take shortcuts, add things in kind of the order that you want. Think about it, a bit in advance, right? So like for instance, if I was going to add here in the detail section these fields, right? Then I would have selected the legal name first because I know it's going to pop up first. But I want this to span all the way, right? So the next thing I select would actually put it in a second column next to the legal name, right? So in this case, I would, pick a different field um, to select potentially so that it went there, and then I would select common name, right? So maybe I would select the parking spaces open, so it would be here adjacent to it, so then I could then just quickly change its row number and then move it down to here, right? So then my first couple things got in. But anyways, if you think about your layout and as you're doing it and you control the order you click things, you can add things to help minimize a bit of the row and column shuffle. Otherwise, you're just going to have to, the best thing to do is you not necessarily pay attention to everything here in the display, but select the fields over here and set their row and column to what you know they need to be, and just go from top to bottom. And then by the time you get to the bottom, this display should be the way that you want, right? Because what happens is as you're setting rows and columns, if you've got two fields that have the same row and column, right, the system is going to let you do that. It's just going to pick one to be first and then push the other one to the side, right? Because HTML is going to say, I can't move to that spot. I can't go to the left because there's already something in that spot, right? So it's going to, so if you're paying attention here as you're adding and moving the columns and the rows and stuff around, it it can turn into a kind of a confusing mess. And so I don't recommend you do that, or at least minimize it a little bit. It's easier if you just select over here in the hierarchy pane, the different fields, set their columns, and then like I said, as you get to the bottom, then you should have everything set the way that you want. And you can skip rows, um, because again, everything is going to move up. So, this could be like, well, you can see that that legal name is actually on row two. It's not row one, right? And then common name is here as on three, and then look, parking space is on row five. Well, what about row four? Right? So because everything moves up, right, those rows and stuff aren't fixed. So row four is empty. There's nothing there. So everything in row five is going to move up to row four. So in the display, it's going to be fine. So it doesn't matter if you're skipping some numbers. So if you're really a perfectionist and anal about it having to be just perfect, well, that's fine. You can do that, but you don't have to. And then there are some other things that you can do as you're doing the layouts that are not visible right now because I don't have this particular form in an editable state because I haven't revised it. But there's things where you can insert a row, right? So if I knew I needed to add a field between these two things, I could select here and then I would come up here and I would click on insert row, and that would basically increment the row number that this field is on and everything else beneath it by one row. And so then I could come and select a field and add it. Now anything I add will automatically go to the bottom, but then once it's down at the bottom, then I could select it and then I can set its row and its column to move it up into the place that I want. All right. So, anyways, just kind of to give you an idea, how is this all going to look, to the user, right? Because they're obviously not going to see this builder tool. You do get an idea of the layout kind of by looking here, but you do have this preview link that you can click, and that's going to open it up as if you were opening up a record, so you can see right my tabs that I have here, right? General, environmental details. I'm sorry. Um, Let me go ahead and collapse this. So general, RPIM, contact data. Oops, I lost my form preview. Let's come back to this and let's put the form builder. I'll put the form builder back and let's go back to our preview. So you can see the tabs here, right? The user has the tabs across the top, so they can scroll through and select the different tabs. Now, one thing that you will see here is this workflow instance. It includes the reports, the associations, the audit actions, right? None of these particular tabs show up here, right? Because those are part of the platform, right? So all you can do is control whether they are visible or not visible on this particular form. And you do that actually in the form properties. So if we were to come to the form properties, and again, we'll discuss these as we create our own form, but you can see here, right, show association, show the workflow instance tab, show the reporting tab, show the audit actions tab, right? These are all selected here, and that's why we saw them in our preview. So the form builder, it's not complicated. It is a bit tedious, not super developer friendly because you can't just drag and drop. You have to use this row and column, you know, grid format, and then the default for that row and column grid format is a 1 by 2, one row with two columns, and then after that, then it'll create another row. So if you're trying to add multiple, fields, across, or you're trying to have, a field that spans multiple columns, right? It takes a little more time to go in and make sure that you've got those settings done correctly. So this is the form builder tool. Um, I do want to do one other quick thing that's kind of related. So you can see our attention section, right? It's in yellow. So, that's part of the properties that we have. We can change, different title bar colors for any of our sections. One of the other things I wanted to point out here on the user message field itself is that we have this label style and data style. So with the user message, you generally want to have it, nice, bright, bold, red, something that's going to draw the user's eye to that area, because you're giving them additional instructions, or trying to tell them what to do, right? Maybe there's a problem that's preventing them from being able to state transition, and you're trying to tell them what the problem is so that they can fix it, so they can move on. Well, you'll see there's no, font or anything like that that's specifically, visible here, but we do have these styles. So in order to see, what this style is, we've got this label style, which affects the actual label, which in this case, we're not displaying the label, so it doesn't matter. And then there's the data style, which affects the text that's inside that text field. So if we want to see, well, what's going on, we're trying to, reverse engineer the section, or better understand what's going on in this section or another section, we need to go to the style editor to see what this is. So I'm going to go ahead and show you that real quick. So we have to go back to the tools menu, and then under style manager, and then if you come to the style sheet editor, you'll see here there's data style class 2. So I'm going to select that, and I can see the properties of that data style. So that data style is, hey, the font is red, and then of course the border is black. So this kind of shows you what it looks like, right? See, I click on the different data styles. That's just regular, black. Most of these aren't going to be set. But you do have the ability to control what the font is, the coloring, and that sort of stuff. So for our user message section, it's data style class 2. We can see it's a nice red font. So as we go to create our own attention sections, right, we're going to want to follow the same sort of pattern and use the same data style. But this will help you as you're, further investigating and digging into existing TRIRIGA sections, and you're interested in styles. How do they come up with that color, that font size, that sort of thing. So with that, that's going to conclude our overview of the Form Builder tool. I hope you will stick with us next time as we get into actually creating our record or form for the CST Sports um, business object. We are going to have to create, the tabs, the sections, add the fields, uh, go through the arranging and doing that field layout. We're going to have to update the state family. So there's going to be a lot to do, and so that's why it's going to be in a separate video. And hopefully I'll be able to keep that video a decent size and not go too long. If not, if it gets too long, we'll break it up. Try to keep these videos smaller and easier to consume for you guys. Uh, Thank you for watching. As always, please like, subscribe to the channel. The subscriber count is probably the best way of letting me know that these videos are worthwhile and are helpful, so that I know to continue making these. So as always, we'll see you next time in the TRIRIGA War Room.